Okay, so now we're live. I had a few issues today with the live stream, but we are on now, and we're talking about perfect pitch today. So, what I was saying was at this point, this really is a grind, right? We go in every day, we spend a few minutes, and we hope to see some kind of results. So, on day 29 of trying to do perfect pitch drills every day for about 15 minutes, and then doing other drills, which I believe support that training, which are going to be posted later in the quiet ear, I can tell you that there is a difference, but it's very subtle. And the thing that I was talking about previously is maybe this is what you guys are experiencing, some of you, when we do relative pitch training, like the flawless ear training course. A lot of people will come to me and they'll say, I don't know how you can just hear, for example, a perfect fifth. How can you just hear it without thinking Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or using some sort of song, or singing up the scale of degrees, or the perfect fourth? How can you hear those different qualities? People have actually said, well, maybe what's going on is you actually have a little bit of perfect pitch. I don't. I have some tone awareness, but that wouldn't help me with identifying intervals, because if I have F and C here and then E and B here, they're going to sound way too different for me. So I actually have to ignore that tone awareness when using relative pitch so that they can each sound like a perfect fifth to me. And, when I first started, I tried to identify intervals very quickly. And for a while, I thought there was no way I'd ever be able to do this. There's no way I'd be able to identify a perfect fifth and a perfect fourth at this speed. Fifth, fourth, fourth, fifth, 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 fourth, 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 fifth. But you can get to that point. And you actually have to get to that point if relative pitch is going to be of any use to you. And the way you get there is by listening daily. It's not something that can be forced or rushed. And I think a lot of times we want ear training programs to give us results in like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We want to have that ear in 4 or 5 weeks, but it's unrealistic. There are ways you can develop a really good ear for a very specialized type of music, like basically nursery rhymes. If you develop tonal hearing, where you relate everything to a tonic. So here's your C, this is your F. The F has a certain pull to the C that the E doesn't. And you can learn to recognize that. But the moment you start getting chromatic, it kind of starts to fall apart. So I think you need a more foundational level of ear training that allows you to be more flexible. And so the point I'm getting at here is right now, if I play a B flat and a C next to each other, if I'm in the right frame of mind, I hear the difference pretty clearly. And that must be similar to what a lot of you are experiencing with relative pitch, where if I play a perfect fifth, it has a different quality to a fourth, which I can recognize. And I recognize it instantly. But it wasn't always that case. Like I said, when I first started trying to hear these intervals, I was listening to perfect fifths and perfect fourths, and they were going by real fast. And I remember thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to hear them that fast. But with daily practice, I was able to do that. And then you add other intervals. And eventually, when you have all the intervals down, and you can just instantly recognize the different types of third, sixth, the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, major and minor sixth. And then you can start to hear chords and inversions. What happens is not that you're training your ear to hear chords, inversions, and intervals. I mean, you are, but what ends up happening is it opens up your ear to where you can hear things that go beyond those chords and intervals. So you get a certain amount of flexibility where if I go in, even if I haven't taught you this, and I play some chordal harmony here, you'll be able to recognize that is something that's built on force. And you'll be able to quickly figure out what those notes are. Or if I play something like this, not a chord, but you recognize there's a minor third in this real quick, and then there's a major second here. Or maybe you'll recognize the perfect fourth on the outside, minor third on the inside, and you're able to use this information to figure everything else out. The problem, and this is the biggest difficulty in ear training, is convincing people that it's worth it. Because, we'll play an instrument every day, and we're okay if it takes us 2-3 months to learn a really complicated song. But we tend to forget that when we started, we had trouble just remembering the fingerings or knowing how to place our fingers or how to breathe properly. We forget how long it actually took just to develop those rudimentary skills. And we continue to push further and further. If you think about it, when you first started playing an instrument, you probably had to think about every single note. But then eventually you stopped thinking about the notes. And so you could start playing simpler pieces. You started to figure out how to play rhythms, and you started to figure out how to play, basic elementary tunes. And then those became simple. You don't have to think about it anymore. Somebody can put some sheet music in front of you, and you'll just push the right combinations of vowels or play the strings the correct way or sing properly, and you'll be able to play it. And now you can probably play more complex things as you get better. It's the same with ear training. It's that once you develop these fundamentals, chords, intervals, the stuff that we hear in most music that is popularized, then it turns into a much more advanced skill. And so what I'm getting at here is I can hear a difference between B flat and C when played slowly and played together. And that subtle difference, my question, which I don't know because I've only done this 29 days, which is nowhere near enough to develop anything. My question is, does that get better? Is there a point where I hear the B flat and the C very clearly? And so that is what I'm trying to discover here. We only have one more day, and so tomorrow I'll spend a little more time talking about my findings. But I can tell you right now that I hear a difference between all these notes. B flat is softer than C. And you see I'm comparing them. C and D. D is softer than C. So I'm using the same comparisons here. D and E. E is bright. It's the brightest note I've played so far. Now D has a little bit of granular activity. It's grainy somehow. Now E and F sharp. E is still brighter than F sharp, but F sharp has this feeling like it's on the edge of a fence, ready to jump off. It's ready to move. F sharp and G sharp. G sharp sounds a little more sunken in than the F sharp, but it has more brightness than most of the other notes I played, except for E. E, I feel, is the brightest one of those. But that's my interpretation of it, and that's not perfect pitch. That is me trying to use words to describe something that can't be described. And so I do think if you want to continue this and you want to develop perfect pitch or get better at hearing the differences between notes, which I think is more realistic, I think that you have to get away from descriptions and just get in there and listen to the notes themselves. Do you hear a difference? Each day. I hear a difference. Okay, next two notes. Do you hear a difference? Yeah, can you replicate it in your mind? And I think that's the key. So developing your internal musical memory and ability to actually hear tones. I was in a composition seminar yesterday, and I had some students who developed a real high level of audiation. And I was surprised because some of them, the audiation ability is based on sort of a generic sound. They're not hearing the violin or a piano. They're hearing kind of a generic sound. And so, I mean, that's something that you really have to work on. You have to work on the ability to hear a piano in your mind, a guitar, a violin. And I recommend starting with your own instrument. If you start with your own instrument, it's going to be easier to replicate that sound because you use it every day or most every day. You're at least more familiar with it than a piano if you're not a pianist. and just work on that ability to recall timbre, the color of an instrument sound in your mind, because that's important. If you can't do that, you can't memorize. Not that it's memorizing, it's recognizing the color. You can't recognize how B flat and C sound different and then hear it internally. And that's the key. We want to hear it internal. So it's the grind, because I think what you have to do to develop this, I don't think there's any magical tricks. I think you really just have to come in each day, spend 5 to 10 minutes, compare notes until you hear a difference. B flat and C right now. How many of you hear a difference? If you're in the chat, say, yeah, I hear a difference, or no, I don't. And you go until you hear that difference. And if you don't hear it, you take a break, you reset for a moment, go back to it again. Put some space between it. Try and hear it a different way. Okay, so let's say I hear the difference now. I go on to the next grouping, C and D. Definitely hear a difference there. So I hear that difference. I try and take a picture of it in my mind, a mental image of the exact sound I played. I try and make it as clear as possible. I close my eyes. There's something known as hypnagogic and hypnagogic states. They're the states where we're going in and out of sleep. And so as you're going into sleep, you'll notice you daydream a little bit, most of us, not everybody. And then sometimes you're coming out of sleep, you can still be a little bit groggy, and you can have kind of that dream state still where you can imagine things pretty clearly. We want to try and get to that state while practicing. So it is sort of a meditation. We want to get to that state. I'm actually yawning thinking about it, but we want to get to that state so that we can be really relaxed listening to these tones. And it's tricky because a lot of times what will happen is you'll fall asleep. So try sitting up or doing something like that so you don't actually fall asleep. And then get relaxed and listen to the two tones. Original sound is off. Sorry about that. So let's listen to the B flat and C real quick. Just listen to the two tones. Can you hear a difference? Listen again. You can even sit at the piano and do this yourself. C and D now. So let's say I heard a difference. Move on to C and D. Clearly hear a difference, but I'm demonstrating. Once you can hear the difference, stop, try and replay it in your mind. Replay that difference. You can't describe it. Notes are not something we can easily describe. I can't really explain what an F sharp sounds like. You have to experience it. How about D and E? And there's a bit of an art to it because you want to do it enough so that the sound comes out clearly, but you don't want to do it so much that the sound then disappears again, because that's what will happen. I think, especially in the early training, you'll start out and you'll be like, okay, yeah, I can clearly hear a difference. And then you try and hear more and more of the difference. I think you need to stop the moment you can hear it very clearly, replay it in your mind, then go on to the next two notes. Oh, so clear. F sharp sounds nasally, like a stuffed up nose. So maybe I'll play it 2 or 3 times to confirm that sound, and then I hear those 2 notes internally. And then I go to my next 2 notes. These are more subtle. I maybe would have to spend more time on these. So I didn't hear anything right then. Let's just say that happened. I take a break. I come back to it. What I'm doing is I'm training you right now to train yourself. Okay, there it is. The G sharp is fuller, but it has a similar sound to the F sharp. So it's fuller and softer. All right, so now that I've done that, that's kind of my warm-up drill. Now, I'm just going to go very quickly through each one of these whole tones as a root note. I'm going to call it an anchor note, and I'm going to go through the entire scale, always comparing it to the anchor note. So B flat is our anchor right now. It's fast, but you just kind of notice if any notes stand out to you. That's the second exercise. Now I'm going to play doubles, 2 notes at a time from that whole tone scale. You could use the white notes of the keyboard. The problem with that is between E and F and B and C, you got a minor second. And so I'd rather have consistent sounds, so I'm using a whole tone scale starting on B flat. So now you try and listen for the lower note and the top note. I don't have a lot of control over my voice like a vocalist would, because most of what I do now that I develop my ear, it's all internal. And so I'll often have to slide into a pitch. But I can get to it, just takes me a second. So that just goes to show you that you don't need to be a singer to have a good ear, because you can do it all internally and you can hear compositions, things you're working on internally if you're using a good level of audiation and you have a good level of relative pitch. So let's listen to our doubles now. And try and hear the quality while they're played together. Next 2 notes. Just maybe listen to them 3 times. This is easy for you to do 3 notes, like this. If it's hard, do 2 notes. If that's easy, do 4 notes. If 4 notes is easy, do 5. If 5 is easy, do 6. If you can do 6, you're pretty much good, because from that point on, you can hear most of what you need to hear. You don't really need to keep expanding it past 6. 6 is kind of the ultimate goal. So you go through that, and I'm going to do this actually because I'm doing the training, just with 2 notes. You'll notice Rick Beato's son, he doesn't sing, he hums. It's a little easier to hum. You have to really have a natural skill for it and be taught how to sing. I was never taught. Almost hurts my ears. Okay, that's kind of the third thing you do, all right? So you start by listening to the individual notes, and then you compare them to the anchor note. The third thing you do is you play doubles, triples, quadruples, quintuples. You keep going on and adding more notes as you can. The final thing is hearing how individual pitches change across the octave. So we'll start with B flat. Compare it always to the middle note, the one in the middle of the keyboard. Then go up to C. It really is true. People say you don't hear them one at a time. You don't learn B flat, then C, then D, then E. You do kind of hear them all at the same time once you start to hear them. It's just such a subtle thing. It's easy to not hear it. It's easy to overhear it. Here's our E. And don't underestimate, with the relative pitch training, with perfect pitch training, don't underestimate what could be happening behind the scenes. You can be developing this really powerful ear, and it's not always apparent until one day something clicks. But it's the exercises that are helping you get there. G sharp. This is kind of a prep drill. This doesn't necessarily teach you perfect pitch. And A sharp or B flat. Okay, we already did B flat. All right, so let's go ahead and now just randomly play some of those notes. Here we go. What note is that? C. B flat. B flat. E. And you may be saying, but I'm using relative pitch. You can. Relative pitch, especially if it's really good, it's going to be automatic. You're going to be like, that's a major third. If that was an E, the next one's G sharp. Or, once you get one note, you can identify all of them because your relative pitch is just so good. But you're still able to listen to the quality of the note, even with relative pitch. So I played a G sharp previously. This is F sharp. F sharp. D, 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 and you just keep going and you try and identify those notes that you've been working on across the piano. So that probably requires somebody else to help you. I actually think the best way to do that is to have somebody else help you. And then if you get it wrong, play the note that you got wrong. So for example, if I play this note and you say it's an E, you say, no, E is here. This is a note that I played. And that's just basic ear training. That's something that is very traditional, goes back a long time, where if you make a mistake, you go back and correct it. The flawless course is a little bit different because I don't require you to correct things. I think you can get better results if you do just go back and hear anything you made a mistake on to make sure that you're hearing it correctly. So it is good to pause and listen at least one or two more times, but it's not really designed where you have to do that. You can just kind of go through each day, listen, and just gradually, incrementally get better a little bit at a time. Okay, so I think that's all we're going to do today, and I will see you again tomorrow for our final day. Remember, today is the last day to listen to the flawless videos. If you're curious about that or want to know if it'll work for you, just binge it. You got a couple hours and go through as many videos as you can. Don't worry about your score. Go through like 5-6 videos if you can today or more, and just see how your ear is tomorrow, because you only have one day left. And if you like it, keep going. Or if you don't like it, find something that works for you. Invent your own thing. So I will see you tomorrow again at 12:30, and that'll be the last day of the perfect pitch training. But I'm going to continue to give updates on my training and let you know if that B flat, that C, that D, that E, that F sharp, G sharp, A sharp work, if I can start to hear them. So tomorrow we're going to round it out, because right now I've been using a whole tone scale. So I'm going to tell you how you can go through and actually hear the chromatic scale, all the different notes, how you should add that, or at least how I think you should add it. And that'll be it. That'll round out this little mini course. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's not really a course because, with a course, I spend a lot of time. I'm really doing a lot of research. I'm playing around with different techniques. I'm making sure the order is correct. I'm really spending a lot of time on the function of the course. This was kind of a first step. Like if I were to create a course, the whole point was to demonstrate how I might go about doing that. So I play around with different techniques that people say work. I test them out. I see if they work. And then if they do, I turn them into an actual course. But I don't think I'm going to do that with Perfect Pitch. I'm perfectly fine with anything I get from Perfect Pitch, just sharing it with people. I don't think Perfect Pitch is the end. I think that once you have it, you realize it doesn't solve all your ear training issues. It doesn't help you play and improvise in real time. Relative pitch, I think, is much more effective for that. But then again, I don't have perfect pitch, so what do I know? All right, I'll see you tomorrow.